You wake up one morning and something peculiar has happened. The old machinery that once drove you the gears of ambition, the endless list of what next, what's better, what's more, it's all gone quiet. There is no particular reason for it, no grand event, no tragedy, no triumph. It is simply that the fuel has run out. You no longer feel the same urgency to get somewhere, to become someone. The world that once looked like a ladder now looks suspiciously like a treadmill. And at first, it's rather terrifying, isn't it? Because your whole life, you've been told that movement is meaning, that to be alive is to be in pursuit. You must set goals, chase dreams, conquer obstacles, make something of yourself. And so we run like rats through a maze that no one quite remembers building. We mistake speed for direction and noise for life. And when the chase suddenly stops, when the inner whip falls silent, we panic. What's wrong with me, you say? Why can't I feel motivated? But what if nothing is wrong? What if, for the first time, something is profoundly right? You see, this strange stillness that descends upon you, this absence of the old urge, is not death but awakening. For so long, you've been running toward a mirage, chasing a self that was always just out of reach, always one more achievement away, one more possession, one more compliment, one more like, one more enlightenment retreat. And suddenly, you stop and notice that the horizon keeps running too. You can't catch it because you are it. Most people live their lives like dogs chasing their own tails, endlessly spinning in circles, thinking that happiness lies somewhere just beyond the next turn. Society rewards this beautifully. The world will always applaud the busy, the driven, the productive. But have you noticed that those very same people, the ones forever running, rarely arrive anywhere? They're always on their way. Their eyes are on tomorrow while life happens quietly behind their backs, whispering, now, now, now. And then one day, perhaps after great effort, you stop. You sit still, and the silence rushes in like an ocean you didn't know was there. No emails to check, no mountains to climb, no dragons left to slay. You've come to the edge of becoming and discovered the great paradox that you were never not what you sought to become. It's funny, isn't it? How absurdly simple it is. We spend decades trying to become ourselves, as if there were a distance between who we are and who we think we should be. But the whole time, you've been here. The whole time, life has been moving perfectly well without your anxious steering. And yet, the ego doesn't like this. The ego needs friction to feel alive. It feeds on effort. When the chase ends, the ego cries out, I'm lost. But that cry is precisely the illusion being revealed. You've mistaken the noise for your nature. You thought you were the striving, the constant commentary, the inner salesman, the restless analyst. But when all that goes quiet, you find something utterly unexpected. Beneath the static is a vast, effortless awareness. It doesn't strive, it doesn't plan, it doesn't compare. It simply is. That is the strange silence after the chase. The moment when the showman within you takes his final bow, and you realize that the stage remains luminous and alive even without his performance. You discover that you don't have to keep running to remain in motion. Life itself is moving you, breathing you, thinking you. And so perhaps this loss of drive is not the collapse of meaning, but the return to sanity. The beginning of wisdom is not the gaining of new ambitions, but the dropping of false ones. For as long as you believe that happiness lies just beyond your grasp, you will live as a beggar in the midst of abundance. But when the grasping stops, when the chase dissolves, you find that everything you were running toward was already waiting here, quietly smiling. And so, before we rush to fix this so-called problem of no motivation, let us pause and listen to the silence that follows the chase. That silence is not empty. It is full of life, full of presence, full of the very thing you were too busy to notice. It is the doorway to the dance. Now, let's take a closer look at how this all began, this marvelous and exhausting game we call becoming. From the moment you were old enough to be measured, someone handed you a scorecard. Do well in school, they said. Be somebody. And so the great game began. The game of improvement, of self-construction, of endless comparison. We learn to move not because we love to dance, but because we are terrified of standing still. It's a curious thing. Our entire civilization is built on the assumption that tomorrow must be somehow superior to today. Progress, success, growth, all these fine words conceal a subtle insult to the present moment. They whisper, not yet happy, not yet worthy, not yet complete. And so, like a donkey chasing a carrot, humanity trudges forward, convinced that fulfillment lies just around the next corner. But, as the old Zen saying goes, you can't get there from here because you never left. We've been thoroughly hypnotized, you see. Our schools, our religions, even our so-called spiritual movements, all tell us that life is a staircase, that meaning lies upward, achievement outward, salvation ahead. But this is a marvelous trick of the mind. For the higher you climb, the more you discover there is no top, there is only climbing. And we call that progress. We admire the climbers, the restless, the striving, the sleepless, those who sacrifice the music of now for the applause of later. We put them on magazine covers, not realizing they are simply better players of the same old game of dissatisfaction. And the tragedy, or perhaps the comedy, is that the game never ends. You see, the ego is the game. It must always have something to chase, some future to imagine, because it cannot survive in the stillness of the present. It is like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. So it invents goals, ambitions, ideals, and then forgets it invented them. It tells itself, I must become spiritual, and runs just as frantically toward enlightenment as it once ran toward wealth or fame. The costumes change, but the chase remains. We mistake becoming for being. We think we are evolving when we are merely running in more sophisticated circles. And all the while, the now, the eternal now, sits patiently, waiting for us to notice that the game is entirely self-created. It is not wrong to play it. After all, the cosmos loves play. But suffering begins when we believe it to be serious business. The universe, after all, is not in a hurry. Stars are born and die without ever rushing to meet a deadline. So perhaps, when your motivation disappears, it isn't that you've lost the game, it's that you've begun to see it. You start to sense the absurdity of a life devoted entirely to the pursuit of an image, an identity, a result. You realize that the one running is also the finish line, that the goal you've been chasing was never somewhere else, never later, never other. And then, like a man waking from a dream, you laugh. You laugh because you've been so busy trying to become what you already are. The laughter is liberation. The seriousness melts. And suddenly, even the chase, the great comedy of becoming, is seen as perfectly divine. One day, the great machine of striving begins to falter. It doesn't announce its breakdown with fanfare or fireworks. It simply slows, stutters, and finally grows quiet. You wake up, and the gears that used to turn so ferociously inside your mind refuse to budge. You look at the vision board, the to-do list, the long road of ambitions, and you feel nothing. The dream of progress, once so bright and holy, starts to look like an elaborate mirage painted on the desert sand. Now, most people panic when this happens. I've lost my spark, they say. I've fallen behind. They rush to doctors, gurus, motivational speakers, anyone who can wind the clockwork back up again. But what's really dying here is not your vitality, it's your illusion. The illusion that life was ever a ladder to climb, that happiness lay at the end of a long and noble struggle. You see, progress is a beautiful myth, one of humanity's most intoxicating inventions. It keeps the factories running, the universities busy, the cities alive. But it also keeps the heart restless, because progress, in its ordinary sense, is built on a hidden assumption that right now is not enough. And when that belief begins to crumble, your entire worldview trembles with it. Imagine a man who's been running for years toward a shining horizon. One day he stops, looks down, and sees that the horizon has moved with him all along. It was never out there. It was just the way the light bends. When he realizes this, there are two possibilities: despair or laughter. Despair, if he clings to the dream of arrival. Laughter, if he sees that the whole chase was unnecessary to begin with. And isn't it strange? We call this collapse burnout, apathy, depression. We medicate it, counsel it, try to cure it. But perhaps it is not an illness, perhaps it is a revelation. The moment when the ego's engine, after years of frantic spinning, finally runs out of imaginary fuel. What feels like failure is actually the universe tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you may stop pretending now. For what is progress, after all? It is the notion that life can be improved, perfected, fixed, as though existence were a project rather than a miracle. The oak tree doesn't worry about becoming a better oak tree. The clouds don't practice floating more efficiently. The sun does not seek enlightenment. Only human beings believe that the universe made a mistake in creating them as they are. So when the dream of progress collapses, when your will to strive dissolves, something extraordinary begins to happen. In the ruins of that ambition, a quiet clarity appears. You start to see that there is nothing wrong with this moment, that the endless war to become someone else was the only thing standing between you and peace. Of course the ego resists. It says, without my striving, I will disappear. But look closely. When you stop struggling to improve yourself, do you really vanish? Or do you finally appear? Do you not feel more alive, more spacious, more real, when you no longer need to justify your existence? You see, progress, as we've known it, is like polishing a mirror that was never tarnished. The harder you scrub, the cloudier it becomes. Only when you stop do you notice that it was already clear, reflecting everything, just as it is. And so the collapse of the dream is not an ending. It is the first gentle crack in the shell of illusion, through which reality begins to breathe. It is the death of the seeker, but the birth of seeing. For when the chase stops, the horizon no longer retreats, it surrounds you. You were never chasing the light. You are the light, momentarily disguised as a runner in search of himself. And now we come to the heart of the matter, the one who believes himself to be doing all this. The one who says, I must find purpose, I must stay motivated, I must become my highest self. Ah, but who exactly is this I? When you look carefully, you find it's a very slippery creature. You can think about your body, observe your feelings, notice your thoughts, and yet you are aware of them. So if you can see your thoughts coming and going, who is the one doing the seeing? Who is this I that imagines itself to be the thinker, the chooser, the actor on the stage of life? Most of us have been raised to believe there's a little person living inside our heads, a kind of mental monarch sitting at the control panel, making decisions, pulling levers, steering the ship. I'm thinking, we say, I'm choosing, I'm planning. But if you really look, there's no such driver in there. Open the hood of consciousness, and you won't find a miniature captain. You'll find only thoughts appearing, disappearing like ripples on a pond. The sense of a separate doer is a trick of language and habit. It's like a wave, believing it is moving itself. The wave forgets that its motion is the ocean's motion. In the same way, you and I forget that what we call my will, my effort, my success, are simply the universe expressing itself through this particular form. There's no puppet master behind your eyes, only the dance of life dancing itself. Think about breathing. You don't do breathing. It happens. Your heart beats, your hair grows, your thoughts arise, all spontaneously, effortlessly. Yet the ego insists on taking credit. It says, I am in control, though it can't even predict its next thought. And so we spend our days like actors who believe the play is real, terrified that if we forget our lines, the world will collapse. But the truth is, the stage is sturdy. The play continues whether or not you remember your script. When you begin to see this, the burden of self-improvement starts to lift. For who is there to improve? The wave cannot perfect itself apart from the ocean. The ocean has been waving quite successfully for billions of years without any help from you. The whole idea that you must push life forward, as though life was somehow lagging behind, is one of our grandest delusions. Now, some people find this realization frightening. They say, if I'm not in control, then I'm nothing. I'm just a leaf blown by the wind. But that's precisely the point. You are the wind. You are not a helpless object being moved. You are the movement itself. The energy that animates galaxies is the same energy that raises your hand, that moves your lips when you speak, when you act. It is the universe acting in one of its countless disguises. Once this becomes clear, something beautiful happens. Effort remains, but strain vanishes. You still plan, move, create, and respond, but you no longer imagine a little me behind it all, tugging the strings. Life becomes a kind of effortless spontaneity, a river flowing of its own accord. You no longer push the current, you are the current. And there's tremendous relief in that, the release of the impossible responsibility to control everything. The illusion of the doer is the root of the restlessness we call motivation. It whispers, you must achieve, you must strive, you must become. But when you see that the doer itself is an illusion, motivation as compulsion collapses. What remains is movement without motive, pure, spontaneous expression. The sun doesn't shine to be praised. It shines because shining is what it is. The bird doesn't sing to impress. It sings because singing is its being. And you live, breathe, speak, and love, because the universe cannot help but express itself as you. So, when the old motivation dies, don't mourn it, celebrate it, for in that death the false doer dissolves, and the real dancer appears, the one who was never separate, never striving, never apart from the dance. You see, once we begin to see through the illusion of the doer, something marvelous happens to the way we look at life itself. We stop imagining it as a journey with a destination and begin to sense it as a dance with no particular goal except the dancing itself. Now, we've been taught to believe that everything must lead somewhere. That childhood leads to adulthood, education leads to career, effort leads to reward, life leads to heaven, or, in more modern terms, to success, impact, self-actualization. And yet, all along, life has never been leading anywhere. It has always been right here. It's not a line stretching from birth to death, but a rhythm, a song, a pulsation beginning and ending, inhaling and exhaling, like the beating of a cosmic heart. We are like travelers obsessed with reaching the last note of the symphony, thinking that will be the moment of triumph. But the purpose of music isn't to get to the end. If it were, the best musicians would be the fastest ones. No, the meaning is in the playing, the unfolding, the resonance of each note with all the others. And life is exactly like that. When you see life as a journey, you spend it preparing, always preparing, preparing for success, for enlightenment, for love, for peace, for retirement, for the afterlife. You live in rehearsal. But when you see life as a dance, you suddenly realize that you are already performing. You are not on your way to the music. You are the music, the wind blowing, the rain falling, the laughter, the tears, all part of the same grand choreography. This is why the sages and poets have always said that life is play lila, as the Hindus call it, the divine game. Not play as in frivolity, but play as in creativity, spontaneity, delight. The cosmos is playing hide and seek with itself, pretending to be you and me, pretending to struggle and strive, and then suddenly remembering that it was never in any hurry. When you understand this, you stop asking, what's the meaning of life? Because you realize that's like asking, what's the meaning of a dance? The meaning of a dance is the dance. The meaning of music is the music. The meaning of life is the living. The instant you demand an explanation, you step out of the rhythm and into abstraction, you trade the melody for sheet music. Now, this doesn't mean that plans and purposes disappear. The dancer still moves in patterns. The music still has tempo and direction. But it's all play. You may work, build, teach, raise children, make art, but no longer as a grim march toward a future salvation. You do it as the flower blooms, as the bird sings, as the wave curls and breaks, for no reason other than that it's in your nature to do so. And then you begin to notice something astonishing. When you stop treating life as a race, you actually move with greater grace. Things flow. Ideas come when needed. Effort arises naturally and dissolves when done. The anxiety of, am I doing enough, fades away, replaced by the quiet trust that life knows how to live through you. You see, the journey mindset is obsessed with control. It's always asking, how can I make sure I get to where I'm supposed to go? But the dance knows no such worry. The dancer doesn't command the rhythm. The rhythm moves the dancer. There is no conflict between the two. When you dance, you and the music are one movement. And that, perhaps, is the great secret hidden in the death of motivation. You have not lost the will to live. You have lost the illusion that you must justify your existence by perpetual forward motion. Life was never a staircase to climb. It was always a song to sing, a rhythm to feel, a dance to join. So if you find yourself tired of chasing, uncertain of where you're heading, perhaps the invitation is not to run harder, but to listen. The music is already playing, and it's been waiting for you to stop marching and start moving. When life ceases to be a journey and becomes a dance, something miraculous happens to what we call work. You discover that action no longer feels like effort. Things get done, but there's no pusher behind them. Words are spoken, movements made, projects completed, yet nobody inside is straining to make them happen. This, you see, is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, effortless action, action without the itch of the doer. Now, people often misunderstand this. They imagine Wu Wei means sitting on a cushion and letting the dishes pile up, waiting for divine inspiration to clean them. Not at all. The dishes still get washed, perhaps even more joyfully, but the struggle disappears. The tension of I must do this is replaced by the playfulness of this is simply happening. Look at nature. The river flows, the grass grows, the cat stretches in the sun. None of it is lazy, yet none of it is forced. The Tao works through spontaneity, not compulsion. The tree does not decide to grow, it just grows. The clouds do not deliberate about raining. They rain when the conditions are right. And so it is with a mind that has awakened. It acts when action is needed, rests when rest is natural, and never feels guilty for either. We have been taught that effort is virtue, that strain is the proof of sincerity. We glorify the struggle, no pain, no gain, grind until you shine. But have you noticed that most of the world's beauty arises without strain? The sunrise doesn't groan to lift itself over the mountains. The ocean doesn't sweat to reach the shore. Even your heartbeat, the most vital of all your labors, happens quietly, without a single thought of productivity. When you act in harmony with the flow of things, you begin to notice a certain rhythm guiding you. You send the email at just the right moment. You meet the right person by accident. The words fall perfectly into place when you stop forcing them. Life becomes cooperative instead of competitive. It's as if the whole universe has been waiting for you to stop trying so hard so it can finally lend a hand. Now, this doesn't mean that challenges vanish. The dancer still meets resistance, gravity itself, but the grace comes from moving with it, not against it. The master carpenter does not fight the grain of the wood, he works with it, and the result is beauty. Likewise, the wise person acts in accordance with the natural current of their own being. When it's time to move, they move wholeheartedly. When it's time to stop, they stop completely. Their life has the rhythm of breathing, exertion and release, effort and ease, always in balance. And here's the wonderful paradox. When you stop trying to control life, you actually become more effective. You act with precision because your mind is not clouded by anxiety. You respond rather than react. You create without second guessing. This is the intelligence of the Tao, an intelligence far deeper than calculation, for it arises not from thought, but from being. You see, our usual kind of motivation comes from friction, from the inner voice that says, you must. But Wu Wei arises from freedom. It is doing because there is joy in the doing, not because there is fear in the not doing. It is work as play, labor as love. You can still build, paint, teach, and heal, but now you do it the way the sun shines, naturally, effortlessly, because it is your nature to do so. So perhaps when you feel you've lost your drive, it's not a failure of discipline, but a call to a deeper harmony. Life is inviting you to stop rowing against the current and discover that the river is already moving you. And once you trust that current, once you see that it carries you even without your constant paddling, you find that the work still happens, but it no longer exhausts, it fulfills. And that, my friends, is the Tao of work, the art of doing without a doer, the intelligence of life acting through you, as you, without the need for any whip of willpower. It is the return of natural grace, the rediscovery that you were never the driver, only the dance. And yet, once we begin to live in this effortless way, this dance with life, a peculiar fear creeps in. For when the old machinery of striving finally goes quiet, the mind grows uneasy. The ego whispers, if I'm not pushing, if I'm not trying, if I'm not constantly becoming, then who am I? This is what I call the fear of emptiness. You see, we have been trained from birth to fill every silence, to crowd every still moment with noise, thought, activity, stimulation. The mind, left alone for too long, begins to panic like a child left in a dark room. It says, quick, do something, think something, become something, because if it stops, even for an instant, it might see the truth, that it doesn't exist in the way it imagined. Most people would rather live in perpetual distraction than face this emptiness directly. That's why we have our endless entertainments, our scrolling, our ambitions, anything to avoid sitting still with the vastness that looks back at us when we close our eyes. But this emptiness, this stillness, is not a void in the negative sense. It is not the absence of life. It is life in its purest form. You see, what we call emptiness is simply the absence of noise. It's what's left when the chattering voice of I finally goes silent. And when that happens, something extraordinary appears. A quiet awareness that was there all along, like the sky revealed when the clouds drift away. It is the spaciousness in which everything happens, the thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, the world itself. But the ego fears this because it thrives on definition. It wants to be something, a success, a failure, a sinner, a saint, anything rather than nothing. To be nothing feels like death. And so, when the striving stops, the ego experiences its own funeral and mistakes it for yours. That is why many people, upon awakening, feel lost or anxious. They say, I feel empty, meaningless. Of course you do. You are feeling the absence of the old noise, the silence that was always here but drowned out by your constant effort to matter. This emptiness is not a flaw in existence. It is its foundation. It is the space in which the dance can happen. Think of a musical note. It only has meaning because of the silence that surrounds it. The pauses between the notes are what make the melody possible. Without silence, music becomes chaos. Likewise, without emptiness, life would have no rhythm, no form. The universe breathes in and out of this stillness. Stars are born, die, and return to it. Waves rise and fall back into it. And you, too, return there in every moment, in the pause between thoughts, in the breath between words, in the stillness between heartbeats. So when you encounter the fear of emptiness, don't rush to fill it. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let the silence speak. You may discover that what you feared as nothing is actually everything, a fullness too vast for the mind to measure. Out of this stillness arises all movement. From this void, every form. It is not the absence of self, it is the source of all selves. In the end, what you are afraid of losing is only the echo of your own imagination. You cannot lose what you truly are, for what you are is the very space in which gain and loss appear. When you rest there, when you no longer flee the quiet, the fear dissolves, and the emptiness reveals its secret face, peace, presence, pure being. So the next time you feel that hollow silence inside, don't call it boredom, don't call it depression, call it the stillness before creation. Call it the breath of the universe inhaling. For out of that breath, life will soon exhale again, effortlessly, naturally, just as it always has. And once that fear of emptiness dissolves, something utterly beautiful begins to happen. Energy returns. Not the driven, nervous kind of energy that comes from anxiety or ambition, but a quiet, radiant vitality that simply is. You find yourself moving again, not because you must, but because you may. Life begins to act through you, like wind through a flute, effortless, spontaneous, and alive. You see, real energy has never been the result of effort. The universe does not strain to keep the stars burning. The earth does not push itself to spin. The river does not motivate itself to flow downhill. Everything in nature moves with a kind of ease because it does not divide itself against itself. There is no inner argument, no should or should not. The tree doesn't say, I really must grow my branches today. It just grows. Human beings, however, have learned the peculiar art of turning life into labor. We separate ourselves from the whole and then demand energy to reconnect with it, like cutting off our own hand and then complaining we cannot grasp. We whip ourselves into productivity, fuel our days with guilt and caffeine, and call this motivation. But that kind of energy always burns out because it was never rooted in the truth. It was powered by the fear of stillness. When that fear vanishes, You stop burning and start glowing. There's no more fight between who you are and what you think you should be. The energy that once went into resistance is released into presence. Suddenly, everything you do feels lighter. You may find yourself cleaning, walking, creating, or speaking without the heavy inner narrator saying, "I must be doing something meaningful." You simply do, and it's enough. This is what I mean by natural energy. It's the kind that arises when you're not trying to summon it. It's the same current that moves through a laughing child, a bird taking flight, or a musician lost in their own melody. It's not deliberate, but it's deeply intelligent. It knows what to do without consulting a plan. You've experienced it, haven't you? Those moments when you forget yourself completely, when you're so absorbed that time disappears, and what you're doing seems to do itself. That's life's energy moving freely through you. The irony is that it shows up precisely when you stop trying to control it. This, too, is why children seem so alive. They don't need reasons to play. They don't ask, "What's the purpose of this game?" They play because playing is what life feels like when it's not being managed. And that spark of playfulness never truly leaves you. It only gets buried under the rubble of seriousness, duty, and fear. When those fall away, playfulness returns not as childishness, but as freedom. And from that freedom, a new kind of intelligence emerges, the intelligence of spontaneity. You start to sense what needs to happen without effort. The right words arise, the right actions unfold. It's as if life has been waiting for you to get out of the way so it could finally move as it always meant to. You no longer use energy. You are energy. You no longer seek inspiration. You are inspiration manifesting itself. Now, this doesn't mean you become endlessly busy. Natural energy has its rhythm, activity and rest, expansion and contraction. Just as the ocean waves rise and fall, your vitality ebbs and flows. To rest is not to fail, it's simply the other half of movement. When you live this way, even rest feels alive. Doing nothing becomes as nourishing as doing everything. So, the rediscovery of natural energy isn't about learning how to get your spark back. It's about realizing it never left. You were just blocking it with too much effort, too much fear, too much self-importance. When those fall away, the energy of the whole universe moves freely through the space you used to call me. And then life no longer feels like something you power. It feels like something that powers you. The sun shines, the wind blows, and you dance. When this natural energy begins to flow again, you suddenly realize that it was never your energy at all. You never owned it, you never produced it. It was the same force that makes the galaxies spin, the same pulse that causes flowers to open and children to laugh. What you called my life was always the universe happening through this form, the great game playing itself. And this is the grand discovery of awakening, that the world is not a collection of separate objects moving around in an empty space, but a single living process, a self-playing game in which every part participates. You are not a spectator dropped into it. You are it, the whole thing, looking at itself from one of its many angles. Think of waves on the ocean. Each wave rises with its own shape and rhythm, but none of them are apart from the sea. The ocean is waving, and each crest briefly calls itself I. It says, "I am this particular wave, with this height and this motion." Then it collapses, laughing back into the deep, and another wave takes its place. Nothing was lost. The ocean didn't go anywhere. It was playing all along. That is precisely what is happening with you. What you call your birth was the universe folding into the form of a person. What you call death will be the universe unfolding again. In between, the wave calls itself by a name, makes plans, seeks meaning, and wonders what it's doing here. But from the ocean's point of view, there was never any problem. It's just movement, spontaneous, creative, and free. When you really see this, an enormous relaxation enters your being. You no longer need to prove yourself, because there is no self to prove. You no longer need to defend your position, because there is no separate position. Life is not a battle between forces. It's a play of opposites, like the crest and trough of a single wave, like inhaling and exhaling. They depend on each other, define each other, and are, in truth, the same motion seen from two sides. You see, most of our suffering comes from the feeling of being an isolated fragment, a skin-encapsulated ego, as I like to call it, standing against the rest of the world. We imagine that life is something that happens to us, and so we spend it either resisting or grasping, fighting against the tide or trying to control it. But once you realize that you are the tide, all conflict dissolves, the resistance drops, and with it goes the exhaustion of perpetual defense. Then something astonishing happens. Compassion arises naturally, because when you see that everything is one movement, harming another becomes like cutting your own skin. You begin to care, not out of moral duty, but out of understanding. Helping another feels as natural as scratching an itch. The separation between self and other melts away into a single current of being. Now, this realization doesn't make life serious, quite the opposite. It becomes profoundly playful. You begin to sense that existence is not a task but a performance, a cosmic hide-and-seek in which the universe hides itself inside a billion forms just to enjoy the thrill of remembering. It forgets, and then it remembers. It sleeps as the stone, dreams as the tree, and awakens as you. And in that recognition, a great laughter echoes through your being. Because you see, the game was never about winning or losing, good or bad, higher or lower. It was always about playing. The purpose of the wave was to rise and fall. The purpose of the music was to be heard. The purpose of life, if we must use that word, is simply to live. When you see that, the anxiety about doing enough or being enough disappears. You realize that you cannot fall out of harmony with life because you are life. You cannot stop the music because you are the music. And you cannot lose the game because you are the game, the player, the playing, and the play itself. So, rather than striving to control the world, you let the world move through you. Rather than worrying about what happens next, you marvel at the fact that anything is happening at all. You become, as the Zen masters say, the mirror with no dust, reflecting everything, resisting nothing, belonging everywhere. And that is when joy becomes your natural state, not the ecstatic kind that shouts, but the quiet kind that hums beneath every breath. The joy of knowing that you were never apart, never alone, never truly doing anything, because all along the universe was dancing itself as you. And so, after glimpsing this vast unity, after realizing that the universe is playing itself through you, something very simple happens. You come home. You return not to the heavens or the mountaintop, but to the kitchen, the street, the marketplace, to the utterly ordinary moment. The profound always leads back to the plain. You see, people imagine enlightenment as a kind of escape, a ticket out of the human mess. But awakening doesn't carry you away from life, it brings you into it wholly, without resistance. It's not about floating above the world, but about finally touching it, touching everything with both feet planted in the mud and a smile in your eyes. There's an old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The difference, of course, is that now you know who's chopping, who's carrying, and who's being carried all along. You no longer work for a reward. You work because working is the song of the cosmos, sung through your hands. You no longer eat to live. You live to taste the miracle of eating. Every sip of tea becomes the universe drinking itself. And this is what I call the art of simple doing. To write an email, to wash a dish, to tie your shoes, all of it done without that background noise of should and must, and what does this mean for me? The drama of becoming subsides, and only doing remains. But it's not dull, far from it. When the mind is quiet, the simplest acts sparkle. The way sunlight hits a window pane, the sound of rain on your roof, the feeling of breath moving through your chest, all become music. You realize that the ordinary was never ordinary at all. The trouble is, we spend our lives trying to turn the simple into the significant. We think the meaning of life must be found in some grand revelation, some cosmic download. But the meaning of life was always hiding in plain sight, in the smell of the morning air, the warmth of a hand, the hum of the refrigerator at midnight. Enlightenment isn't about gaining some supernatural power. It's about losing the inability to notice what's already here. When you live this way, you no longer divide experience into sacred and mundane. Making breakfast is prayer. Folding laundry is meditation. Laughter with a friend is philosophy. The divine has stopped hiding in the temple and come out into the marketplace, and you see that it was never elsewhere. And perhaps most beautifully, you find yourself lighter, unburdened by the great seriousness that once haunted you. You see, the universe is not a factory churning out souls for judgment. It's a playground, exploring its own possibilities. So you play your role not with arrogance, not with apathy, but with joy. You live fully, love freely, cry honestly, laugh often. You participate in the cosmic dance without trying to lead it. So when you wake tomorrow, don't ask, what should I do to be spiritual? Just breathe, stretch, pour yourself a cup of tea, and notice the miracle that it's pouring itself. That is the essence of practice, the unforced grace of being here. For the true mark of awakening is not that you have transcended the world, but that you've finally joined it. You no longer stand apart, asking life to explain itself. You bow, smile, and step into the next moment knowing that whatever comes, it is you. And that, my friends, is the simple art of living after the great discovery to dance without destination, to work without worry, to love without reason, to live as if every breath were the beginning and end of time, because, in truth, it is. And now, my friends, we arrive at the punchline. After all the striving and seeking, the effort and exhaustion, the discipline and despair, what you finally discover is that the whole thing was a joke, a divine, exquisite, perfectly timed cosmic joke. You spent your life trying to get there, and there was nowhere to go. You labored to find meaning, and life itself was the meaning. You sought God, and found that the seeker was what you were looking for. And the moment you see this, you can't help it, you laugh. You laugh like a child who suddenly realizes that the monster under the bed was just his own shadow. This laughter isn't cynical, it's liberation. It's the laughter that bursts out when the weight of the world falls off your shoulders, when you realize that you were never carrying it at all. You were the world, pretending to be someone carrying the world. What a magnificent trick! You see, the universe loves to play hide and seek. It hides as form and seeks as awareness. It hides as the many and seeks as the one. It hides as you, chasing itself through the corridors of time, only to discover, in the end, that there was never anything to find. The whole game was love in disguise, the infinite discovering its own reflection in 1,000 mirrors. That's why the saints smile, and the sages chuckle, and the Buddhas grin like mischievous children. They've seen through the grand seriousness of existence. They know that even suffering, even sorrow, even death are all part of the dance. For every tragedy in life has its counterpart in laughter, not because it's funny, but because it's fleeting, because it's all movement. The tears, the joy, the birth, the death, all ripples on the surface of the same still sea. And if you listen closely, beneath all the noise of the world, you can hear it. That cosmic laughter humming at the heart of everything. It's there in the wind through the trees, in the roar of the ocean, in the sigh you release when you stop pretending to be in charge. It's life laughing at its own seriousness, inviting you to do the same. You see, to awaken is not to withdraw from the game, but to realize you were never in danger of losing. You can still play your part, love, build, grieve, create, but you play lightly now. You dance without clinging, act without anxiety, speak without trying to convince. You know that the script is already perfect, even when it feels messy. And so you bow to it, you honor it, and then you let it go. When you understand this, you see that enlightenment was never a destination, but a punchline waiting for the right pause. The punchline that says, you were it all along. The universe pretending to forget itself, just for the sheer joy of remembering again. So laugh. Laugh with the stars, with the trees, with the dust and the dawn. Laugh because there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to fear, nothing left to prove. Laugh because the joke is too beautiful to take seriously. And in that laughter, that warm, belly-deep, utterly honest laughter, you find peace. Because laughter, you see, is the sound of the universe remembering itself.